What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Kilo Loco, and today we're going to be working with Flutter. So we're coming in at day 16 of hashtag 30 days of Flutter, and today in this tutorial we're actually going to be building out a Pokedex app. So I hope you're familiar with Pokemon. It was a huge thing in 2 different generations, so I think that most people should understand what Pokemon is, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be hitting a Pokemon API, getting that data, and we're going to actually be using our state management BLoC. We're going to be using that Flutter BLoC package. Oh yes. And we're going to be essentially building out our Pokedex app using that pattern. So if you're not familiar with the Flutter BLoC libraries, make sure you go back and watch the last couple of videos. We're going to be using everything that we've learned so far in order to build this app. So with all that said, let's go ahead and jump right on in. And as you can see, we're starting off with a blank Pokedex app. It just has an app bar right here in the title. We have our main.dart right here as well. It's just showing that Pokedex view looking real saucy like. And then we have our pub spec. Now we do already have Flutter BLoC and HTTP installed as our dependencies. So just make sure that you're caught up with that. Also, before I forget to remind you, the link is in the description if you want to go to the repo, download either the starter project or the finished project. You're going to have to check out one of those branches. But yeah, anyways, let's head back over to the main.dart, because anybody that knows anything about Pokemon knows that the Pokedex is not blue. Let's change it to red real quick. All right, so as you can see, we already updated this theme, and we're going to need to do a nice hot restart, and we're going to see that beautiful, luxurious red pop up for our Pokédex, because that's how they roll, right? All right, now that we already have that taken care of, because it's pretty important in my opinion, but now that we got that taken care of, let's go ahead and check out the API that we're going to actually be dealing with. So we're going to be working with pokeapi.co. You go ahead, check this API out. You can do all kinds of different things with it, but we're going to be working with the basics. Now, as you can see, you can get like more detailed information about the Pokemon. We're not going to touch on that today. What we're going to do is we're just going to simply list out all the Pokemon, right? And as you can see, it's going to return back this type of data right here. So it's going to have the count of the total amount of Pokemon, what the next query would be if you wanted to actually get the next page, because right now it's only showing the first 20 by default. It only shows 20. And then it tells you if there's a previous page or not. It's going to give you another string just like this one. And then we have like all these like listings. That's what I'm going to call them, Pokemon listings, right? Where it's going to contain a name and a URL. So that's going to be inside of this results right here. And you can actually see that it's an array of objects like this. So this is exactly what we're going to be working with. More specifically, our API is going to look like this. So if we actually copy this into the URL, if you wanted to take a look at how big this data is, and we can just copy this into the URL, and we can actually see the raw JSON come back because it is a GET response. So this is what it's going to look like. This is what we need to pull into our app, and then we need to essentially parse it out so that we can actually use this data. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy some of this JSON just so that we can reference it in our app. So I'll take 2 Pokemon and I'll take the rest of the data. Let's go ahead and start off by creating a response object that's going to handle this actual JSON, right? Because we're going to be needing it when we're going to be doing that networking request. So I'm just going to call this Pokemon page response. All right, so as you can see, we have our Pokemon page response. I'm going to call it page because we're only going to be able to pull so many Pokemon in at once. I think that we technically can pull all 1,000 of them, but it would make sense to only pull down what you're actually going to need as opposed to just everything. It's better to do that way. Anyways, what we're going to do is we're going to create an object that represents this. Now, there's only really 2 different pieces of information from this JSON right here that we actually need. And that's going to be if we have a next object, right? Like whether we need to be able to load more data, and the result object. Now the result object is an array of objects, right? So we need to be able to parse out the results and these objects in here, which we're going to call Pokemon listings, so that we can get the name. So we have the name Wobbuffet and then the URL. We're not going to necessarily need the actual URL, but what we do need is the ID of that Pokemon. So that Pokemon's ID is hidden inside this URL right here. And that's also something that we need to parse out. So since we are going to have an object, right, that represents this, and it's going to contain an array or a list of other objects, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the smaller object first. It just makes more sense to build that out so that we can actually continue to fill out our Pokemon page response. So let's go ahead and build out our Pokemon listing object. All right, so as you can see, we have our Pokemon listing, and it's going to have two properties on it, right? It's going to have an ID and it's going to have a name. So that means that when we create this Pokemon, that we need to pass in both of those properties, which also means that we're going to need to parse this out before we're able to instantiate this actual object. Now, just like we did when we were working with the post API, we need to create a constructor that's going to allow us to create a Pokemon listing from JSON. So let's go ahead and start building that out. All right, so as you can see, we have our factory constructor, right? And this is going to allow us to take in some JSON and then parse out those variables as long as they're, or parse out those values as long as the key is spelled correctly, right? So we have name and we have URL. Now remember, the name we can just simply pass into our constructor right here. No problems, no biggie, right? The problem right here is the ID. Now, the way that I choose to handle this, which is a little bit dangerous, but we're kind of relying on the API to continue to stay consistent and continue to function and provide back the same type of data every single time. The way that I'm going to actually do this is I'm going to parse out this number right here. And the way that we can do that is as long as our URL is a string, which right now it's a dynamic, it doesn't know what it is, but if we cast it to a string, then it gives us the ability to split our string up by a specified character. Now, what I mean by that is I can break this string down right here, this URL down, by any character that I specify. So I could do it by like an O. I can like separate each object in our string by an O. But what we actually want to do is separate it by the slashes, because what we want to do is get this number, which is in between slashes. So I'm going to split this string up into a list of elements, or a list of strings, right? And it's going to be split up by the slashes. That means that this is going to be in its own separate, this is going to be an element in that new array or in that new list. This empty space in between the two slashes is going to be a new element. This is going to be a new element. This is going to be a new element. This one's going to be a new element. That's going to be an element, and that's going to be an element inside of our list of strings. Now, all we have to do is just count what index that would be if we were to split up that string, right? So if we're going to count every space in between slashes, we would start right here, which is going to be 0. This spot is going to be 1. This is going to be 2. This would be 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we're going to actually be looking at the 6th position in our string to get that ID out. So let me show you how that's done. And just like that, very simple, very straightforward. Once we have our string URL, we're going to split it up by a specified character. In this case, it's a /. We're going to get the 6th index of that new split up string, which is a list of different strings. You can see it right here if it pops up, a list of different strings, right? We're going to get the 6th index, which we know because we counted. We know how to count, right? We're like Count Chocula up in here. And we get the 6th index, which is our ID. Awesome. So now we have the ID. We simply return a Pokemon listing. And boom, just like that, we now have our Pokemon listing object, which can now be parsed from JSON. So let's make our way down over to our Pokemon page response, and it should be relatively simple to parse this out, right? We just simply need to get next, right? We'll check if it has a value or not. If it does, then we know that we can actually load another page. But if it doesn't have a value, if it's null, then we know that we can't, right? So that's going to allow us to have a Boolean that specifies, can we load another page or not? And then for the results, we just simply parse out each of these JSON objects into listings. And then we have our Pokemon listings. So let's go ahead and update our Pokemon page response with those properties. All right, so as you can see, we built out our Pokemon page response with everything. So let's go back through it, right? So we're gonna have two properties on this bad boy. We're gonna have the Pokemon listings, and we're gonna have the can load next page boolean, right? This is gonna help us out in the next video when we're actually going to be loading next pages. So that's why we're adding it in now. Anyway, we have our Pokemon page response, our regular constructor. We just need to make sure that these are required, just so that it's easier to figure out how we're gonna build this thing out if we, forget how to construct the object. Anyways, down over here in our factory constructor from JSON, once again, passed in JSON, we're gonna check if the next value or the next key has a value in it. If it does, then we know that we can load the next page. If it does not, then it's equal to false. And our Pokemon listings is, once again, this result key is going to have an array on it. So we're going to cast that as a list, right? And a list can be mapped, and we can iterate over each of those objects, which is going to be a listing JSON. We pass that listing JSON into a Pokemon listing from JSON constructor. It's going to create our Pokemon listing object. And then we just need to make sure that we cast that back to a list, because that's what we plan on working with, right? We don't want that nasty iterable. So that's what we've done so far. Now we can actually start building out our networking request, right? So we're going to kind of follow what the BLoC documentation recommends with the naming conventions. So we're actually going to build out a repository. Now, they also recommend that you build out your another part of that layer into a client. We're not going to do that. We're going to keep it a little bit more simple, but we're going to switch the names up a little bit. So let's just go ahead and create a new file. We can call it Pokemon repository. All right, so as you can see, we got our Pokemon repository object. I already have HTTP imported right here. We know we're gonna need it up in the repository, right, baby? Oh, yes. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add two different properties on our object, right? So the first one is gonna be our base URL. So this is essentially just the string to the API, right? We need to get that URL from our API. So if we jump back over to that API, then we can grab it right here. Now remember, the base URL is just this piece, the part that doesn't have any slashes or none of that stuff on it. So we're gonna grab it and we're gonna just throw it in right there. Kaplow. Next, what we wanna do is we also want to have a client. Now, this is for dependency injection purposes. If you don't know what dependency injection purposes are, or dependency injection is, then don't really worry about it. Just know that doing things like this will help you make your code more scalable, more reusable, and testable in the future. So all we're gonna do is we're just gonna create this new property called client, and this is gonna be of type HTTP client, like so. And then we just initialize that bad boy, throw a semicolon at the end, and boom, we're good. So now what we wanna do with our repository is it's going to have like all the different networking requests or the different functions that represent the networking requests that we are going to be capable of doing in this app. So what we want to do is we want to get the Pokemon page, and we want to make sure that we're able to get it at a specific index. So we need to pass in the page index. So let's start building that out right now. All right, so this is what our function signature is going to look like, right? We're going to return back a future Pokemon page response, and we're going to call this function get Pokemon page, and it's going to pass in a page index. Let's head back over to that API. Let's see how we're going to construct this request, right? So as you can see, as you most clearly can see, we're going to be hitting this endpoint, right? API v2 Pokemon, then we have query parameters, right? And what we want to do is we want to set a limit so that we can always be working with the same amount as we get them back, right? In this case, they have their limit set to 100. I'm going to up it up to 200 because we super crazy up in here. So let's say that we wanted to get back 200 Pokemon objects, right? And we needed to start off somewhere. Well, the first offset that we're going to start off is going to be with 0. So anybody that knows anything about Pokemon knows that Bulbasaur is the first Pokemon. So as you can see, we get Bulbasaur back as the first Pokemon at the 0 index. And then we're going to go all the way up to the 200th index, or well, 199th, or well, 200th index, but it's going to say 199 next to it. but we should see Pokemon 200 all the way at the bottom. So if we scroll, we can see that it's Mischievous. I don't know those Pokemon names. Anyways, we can see that this is Pokemon 200. So we're going to get back all those Pokemon, right? So then what is this whole offset thing? Well, the offset is saying, okay, we already have X amount of Pokemon. In our case, we have 200. So the offset that we want to pass in is going to actually be 200 when we get the next page, right? So when we get the next page, you can see that we're going to start at 201, and we should go all the way up to 400. Then when we want to get the third page, right, we want to actually get 400, right? Or yeah, offset is going to be equal to 400, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to see that it's going to start at 401 and it's going to go all the way up to 600. So we can use the API to get the next offset. So like, as you can see, the next offset, it's actually doing the math for us and we don't really need to do it. The offset would be 600, right? But I don't really like the way that they implemented the API, and we can just do the math locally. So we're actually going to set it up so that we calculate the offset ourselves, and then the limit will always be 200. So it'll be easy to calculate what's next. So let's go ahead and we can copy some of this stuff in here just so that we can see what our parameters are going to look like. We'll throw it in right there. And now we need to construct the URI that we're going to go out and get. All right, and there we have it. So we have our query parameters, which you can see limit is going to be set to 200, and the offset we can just simply calculate. So we could do it the page index times 200, and that will give us our offset. So when we first get the 0 parameters, right, or when we first get the 0 index, that's going to be 0 times 200. So we're going to say offset 0. When we do page index 1, that's going to be offset 200. Index 2, that's going to be offset 400, right? So that creates our calculation on how we're going to get the next index and what the offset is going to be. Then we create our URI, we pass in the base URL, the path to the API, and then our query parameters. We get our response back, turn it to JSON, pass that JSON into our Pokemon page response from JSON constructor, like boom. All right, so we're pretty much all done with the networking request. Let's go ahead and start making our block so that we can actually interact with this. So this is going to be our Pokemon page block, and we can just actually create a new folder that's going to hold all of our block elements in it. So let's just create a new folder called block, keep some of our code kind of organized. Let's keep it organized, right? And we could create a new file. And what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create the events and the states. So I'll create the event, state, and the actual the block file as well. All right, so as you can see, we created this Pokemon BLoC class right here, and we got a couple of imports at the top just so you know. And it extends BLoC, which is going to take in a Pokemon event and a Pokemon state, right? So the event and state are just simply abstract classes. We're going to keep them in separate files and things like that. And we haven't actually created any subclasses of those abstract classes. So we're not going to be able to map any states just yet, but as you can see, we have our constructor, which right now we're just passing null. We're going to fix that right now. And then we have our map event to state as well, which is required in order to extend BLoC. So first thing that I want to do is let's head over to event. Let's think about the different events that we're going to be dealing with. Well, right now we're only going to be dealing with one single event, which is to actually request the Pokemon. So let's go ahead and add that new class right here. All right, so as you can see, we created our Pokemon page request. This is going to be our only event at the moment. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're requesting a specific page, because remember, when we're going to be interacting with our API, when we're going to be sending or requesting those Pokemon and our Pokemon page result or response, then we need to pass in an index. That's going to be this page. So we're going to pass in which page we're actually looking to get. Then we can actually get that page when we pass this event. So now let's go ahead and think about the different states that we're gonna have in the app. So we're gonna have the initial state when it just first starts off and there's nothing to do, right? It's not gonna last very long. We're gonna be almost immediately trying to get the Pokemon. So we're gonna have initial state. We're gonna have the loading state, because as soon as we launch the app, we're gonna try to get those Pokemon. Then we're going to have a success and a failure state. So we have the success state, which should return back our Pokemon listings and whether or not we can load more Pokemon. And then we also have the failure state, which is just simply going to hold our error so that we can present that to the user. So let's go ahead and add in those 4 different states. All right, and there we go. We have our 4 different states. Pokemon initial, that's going to be our initial state. Load in progress, load success, and load fail. So once again, the load success needs to carry on essentially the data that we're interested in from our API, the Pokemon listings and the can load next page. And then the load failed, got to pass that error, baby. All right, so that's done. Now what we can do is head back over to our BLoC and start handling these different, well, the only event, but passing out those different states, right? All right, and there we go. So now we have filled in our Pokemon block with all the different states and the event, right? So first we need to make sure that we're passing in an initial state. That'll be our Pokemon initial, straightforward. Then whenever we do receive an event, right now we only have the one, it's going to be a Pokemon page request that is going to kick off whatever state or whatever UI is going to be represented by this Pokemon load in progress state, right? Then what we're going to do is, since we now have a Pokemon repository instance inside of our Pokemon block, what we can do is we can await for the response from the Pokemon repository, the get Pokemon page. Right now we're going to pass in a hard-coded 0 index. In the next video, we're going to be handling this and showing how to increment it. But we get our Pokemon page response. That page response is going to be of type Pokemon page response, which has the Pokemon listings and can load next page, right? Now, if that fails for whatever reason, then we'll just simply yield out our Pokemon page load failed state, and we'll pass the error through to that state as well. So just remember, we're working with async star. That means that we can yield out values to our stream, and this will continue to keep flowing. So really nice stuff when you're working with a stream. Oh yes. So we pretty much have our block all built out. We have our networking request all built out. Now we need to start implementing it into the UI. So that means that we need to, well, first we need to save this file right here because it didn't get saved. But we need to head back over to our main.dart. We have to update our home to actually be working with our block builder or block provider, right? So we can't use any of our blocks unless we actually provide those blocks to our widget tree. Now, I already know that we're going to be working with multiple blocks, especially in the next video. So we're going to just kick it off by working with a multi-block provider from the get-go. So let's already start implementing our multi-block provider and set our Pokedex view as our child. All right, so we set up our multi-block provider, so we're ready to go in the next video. But right now we're just simply passing in that block provider for the Pokemon block under our providers list, and the child is going to be that Pokedex view. Now, let's go over here to our Pokedex view, and now we can start building out our state for we can start building out our UI based off of the different states by simply providing a block builder in our body of our scaffold. So let's add that now. Whoa, that was a lot of code. Oh boy. Yes, it was. But let's go back over it because it's nothing that we haven't covered before, right? All right. So as you can see, we have a couple of different states, right? So we're checking if it's the load in progress state, if it's a success state, if it's a failed state, or if it's anything else, which it could be like the initial state or something really weird happens, then we'll just simply show that container, that empty sexy container. Okay. Anyways, if we have the load in progress, let's show that circular progress indicator. Let's let the user know that we're loading the thing, right? If we get success, that means that we do have our Pokemon listings back and everything. Well, let's go ahead and build, let's create a grid view with the builder. And remember, the builder takes in the tongue twister right here, which specifies how many columns you want to work with, right? In this case, we're going to be working with 3 columns. So then we need to specify the item count so we don't get no nasty red at the bottom of our grid view when we scroll all the way to the bottom. And then we have that item builder, which is going to return a card. So we want that sexy card life, right? And that's going to have a grid tile on the inside of the card, which is going to have a child of a column. Now we're using a column so that we can show both the image and the text. Now the text we're able to access right away, right? We're going to actually get the specific Pokemon listing, and that has a name property on it, right? So we can already work with that. I'm going to get back to this image network right here in a second, but let's just go over the load failed state, right? So if it failed to load, then bam, we're just going to simply show that text in the middle of the screen saying, hey, app blew up, developer doesn't know what they're doing, and it ain't your fault. So anyways, what we want to do is we want to be able to work with the image string, right? We want to know where we can download the image from for our Pokemon. And we're going to do that from, a network. It's going to be a network request, right? So if we go back over to our Pokemon, and what I want to show you is, like, let's say we choose Ditto, right? I looked through all this JSON, and the cool thing is that it has a property called sprites. And as you can see, there's a front default, and the path is exactly the same for every single Pokemon. The only difference is their ID. And that's why we pulled out that ID. See, I had a plan all this time. All right, so that's what we're going to actually be using that ID for. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this URL. And if you want to take a look at it, you want to look at Ditto, you want to look at him in the eyes, bam, look at him. Look at him. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our Pokemon page response.dart file, because that's where we have our Pokemon listing in here. And now we're actually going to create a computed property, because we already have the ID. We know what the ID is, but now we need to actually create the URL for that ID. So what we'll do is we'll create a computed property, which will simply just get that URL and pass in the ID there. So let's do that now. All right, so it's as simple as that, right? String get image URL. It's going to return this string right here. We swap out that 132, make it dynamic by using some string interpolation, like so. Bam. Now, oh, what happened right there? I don't know. Bam. As you can see, we're going to simply pass in whatever that ID is right here into this area right here, and then we'll have the images. So with that done, let's head back over to that main.dart file, or not the main.dart file, what? Pokedex view. Oh my God. And let's go ahead and, whoa. It's going a little bit too crazy, huh? What's going on? We want to get that Pokemon listing passed in the index. And we're going to say image URL like so. Bam. So now we're pretty much done. So let's go ahead and pull up our app. Let's see if it works. Let's see if it works. Oh no, it doesn't work. And why doesn't it work? If you can leave the answer down in the comments, why doesn't it work this far? We missed a sexy step. What step did we miss? Did you guess? I hope you guessed. It's over here when we're doing our BLoC provider. So we're actually never calling our, we're never adding that event to actually do the Pokemon page request. So over here in our main.dart file, what we can do is we can add that sexy cascade, right? And then we say add, and then we say what event we want to add. We want to add that Pokemon request, right? Pokemon page request right there. Like so. We want to pass in the page like that. And what we can actually do is we can go back over to our BLoC. And since we don't need to do that right there, we can use event, and we can say event dot page like this. So we want to hard code it, but we're going to hard code it at the front, right? So we're going to hard code it right here that it's going to be whatever event page is passed in, which we're going to pass in that page right here, looking real fine like. Let's do that restart. Let's open up our app. I hope that you were able to guess it correctly. And bam, our app blew up. So let's take a look at what's going on. Tried calling map on Pokemon listing and it was null. So we have map was called on null. So it's giving us an idea where we failed at, and we got pretty far without having to do a whole lot, or without, actually running it a whole lot. So let's go ahead and find out where we actually did that. And I think it's over here in our Pokemon page response. And I think it might be right here. So it says result, but I think it's results. Is it results? Let's find out. Let's go back over to our API. We can check it. Did I get it wrong? 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 Let's find out. So now we're going to go to this. We're going to go, bam, see? I found it on camera because I know what I'm doing. All right. So I spelled it wrong. And because it wasn't spelled exactly the same, it's supposed to be like that. It doesn't matter right here. That could say the same. That could say poop. It doesn't matter. The important part is right here when we're trying to grab it. It wasn't spelled exactly correct. And that caused the entire thing to blow up. Let's go ahead and try that again. I love when I film on camera for you because I can show you just how awesome we are. Look at this. Look at this. Whoa, boy. Look at it. It takes a second to load, but ooh, and then it and then it caches them. It caches them for you. Ooh, look at that. Yes. All right, so that's going to be it for today. I do have a small little challenge for you before we go to the next video. I want you to see if you're able to actually select a single Pokemon and start opening up the details page, because that's what we're going to do in the next video. I want to see if you can do it before we get to that next video. So try to do it yourself before you watch that one. But if you can't, that's what we're going to cover in the next video. We're going to be building it out. We're going to actually go to the next page. We're going to have a whole entire detail screen where it's going to show all the information about the Pokemon. It's going to be really cool. It's going to be really sexy. Or another challenge that you can try. Are you able to, load more Pokemon? That's another one to try out. All right, so that's going to be it for today. I hope that you enjoyed the video. I thought this was a really cool app to build out. Pokemon was like one of my favorite things growing up, so I thought you might enjoy this if you were like me. So thank you for your time. If you liked the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. I mean, you made it this far, you might as well. If you haven't subscribed yet, I don't know what you're doing. Please subscribe. It makes me feel good on the inside, and it makes me know that, hey, you want more Flutter videos. So yeah, that's cool too. All right, so that's going to be it for today. Thank you for your time. Go out there and keep coding passionately.